Hey, man, that was tiring.
Yeah. You're
Good,
probably ready to cut me right now.
dude. It's all good. How have you been?
Oh, I've been pretty good, man. Just been busy. Just working up in
Tell
the
me,
gym.
what are you doing? I see you're coaching.
Yeah, basically just coaching the whole team now. Then it's me, Mike, Jeff, then making money doing privates. You understand how it is, just that whole hustle. Anything just not to be living in that
For
like
sure,
little corporate bubble. You know what I mean?
dude. I hear you. It's it's getting harder and harder though to fight that machine.
Yeah.
But you just got to listen to your heart. You got, but then again, then it would probably find some other way to be outside of the norm.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you got babies too, don't you?
um, Babies, man. I got a sophomore and an eighth grader.
Yeah, that's all I got right now.
Yeah. So the time took a hold of me and yanked me real fast, and I don't anticipate it slowing down anytime soon. But I'm enjoying myself. I'm out in. I live in Pacific now, almost or in between Eureka and Pacific.
Nice. You got a house?
So yeah, yeah. I just we bought a house. We were living in St. Charles, but then I just wanted to be closer to where my kids are going to school.
Right on.
Me and their mom share custody. So, but it was just getting to be too much of a commute from St. Charles out to Eureka to try to, support my kids the way that I wanted to support them.
Yeah, St. Charles is
And
expensive too.
no, oh, I know. And, I don't know how this market's going to go, but, our house sold quick. And I was surprised at what we got because I never anticipated that. But people want to live in St. Charles for some reason.
Th-
People love
That's
it.
why we left Phoenix, man. Phoenix just got insane. Like in 2018, the house across the street sold for like 210. Then in 2021, our house sold for 450. It was insane.
Yeah, that I mean it's inflation. Everything is skyrocketed. Hopefully you bought Bitcoin, dude, because that's Bitcoin just launched as soon as this new administration
I know. Still
got
don't
in.
trust it yet. I think I'm like too old school. Still
I
too old
know.
school. I feel like it's just the government's just gonna step in and be like, no, no, you guys can't do it. But who knows?
Yeah, I think the same thing, but then I wonder what all the pieces of paper that are in my wallet are supposed to, and
Exactly.
people
Fuck.
always will tell you that cryptocurrency isn't backed by anything, and I agree 100%. But I said neither is that paper pockets, and somehow that keeps us functioning day to day.
Right. It's all fool's theory. It's only as valuable as you
Um,
think it is. Same with dollars.
do you do you do you miss competing at all?
No, no, I don't. Uh, Competing made training worse. I
what
just
do you?
generally like training. I just like the lifestyle. I just like going to practice. I just like the sport in general.
Say more about. I don't understand why. If it's about the train, you don't like the training.
I just feel like no, I like the training. I love training. I could just train all day, really. But like the anxiety and pressure that like competing puts on it, kind of takes away a lot of the fun. And then I don't know why, but I've just never been great at trying to like slow my mind down in those moments. Like I feel like I'm in the gym. I feel like I'm incredible. I feel like I can compete with anyone, and I have competed with anyone. And then when you get to the bright lights, it's kind of crippling. You know what I mean? I don't know if
Yeah.
that's like I don't know, low self esteem or low confidence or just I don't know what it is, but I can hack it. Whenever I would get to the big stage, like I felt like the walls are kind of closing in. Like I was more concerned of everything that was going on around me instead of like what was in front of me. So I felt like it took my skill set and just minimized it to the point where I just couldn't even react with my natural instincts, if that makes sense.
Oh, dude, it makes a whole host of sense to me. But that's that whole man in the arena type of a thing.
Exactly.
And if you haven't ever competed, if you haven't ever felt that sort of pressure, um, one wouldn't understand. Although I try to explain it to average folk who maybe haven't been in that situation as think of like even just public speaking.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you get in front of a handful of people, just a crowd at work or something. You got to give a dookie their pants and start stutter their the topic that they've been working in for 5 years.
Yeah.
The everyday stuff just becomes that much more difficult. And so that sort of attention, I think, let alone 1,000 eyeballs on you, it's
Yeah.
I wonder. I always think about these high level guys, and I wonder, if they, is you don't actually ever get over it, you just find a way to manage it better.
Yeah.
And you know, it's one of those things where I think if we get caught up on it's so natural. If we get caught up on wanting to get rid of the feeling,
Right.
just dealing with it to embrace the moment. That's my advice because things taken on voluntarily
Yeah.
are so much easier than things forced upon you. And if you take on that role, if you take on the nervousness and the anxiety voluntarily, you kind because it goes
Right.
you can tell yourself that 1,000 times, but I think that, and when you don't experience it, um, yeah, it's one of those things. And but you're talking about how many did you have?
I had 9, but so when I moved to Phoenix, so I have eye disease too, right? So like when I moved to Phoenix, so every time I rub my eyes, it kind of makes it a little bit worse. It's called keratoconus. Like Nam Fan had it. Steph Curry actually has it, and it causes like a super bad stigmatism. And like you can get hard contacts for it, but like it's kind of like almost like bifocal contacts. You know what I mean? Like they're super thick, and it's not really something you can compete with like in MMA and stuff. So like once that started kind of getting worse, it started getting really worse in my right eye, and I had to go get eye exams to fight in California, and I got an eye exam when I was like 21, and they said, "Oh, you could possibly have this." Right, and I didn't really realize how bad it was getting until I started going back to the eye doctor to get the eye exams. And then, they kind of put that in the back of my head. I mean, I'm not trying to blame them. It was already there, but like,
Right,
they're kind of saying, this is getting worse. Then, like, next time I went to fight in California, it was getting worse. Then when I went to fight in Chicago, they were like, it's getting pretty bad. So it was like that kind of set in back my mind where I was like, I got to really accelerate what I'm gonna do here. You know what I mean? So like, how can I go viral? How can I climb this ladder fast? So every time I got into the fight, I was like, I got to make this as memorable as possible. And I always kind of laugh about it because I was like, I was trying to find a way to go viral, and then I found a way to go viral, except I was on the blunt end of it. You know what I mean? I was viral on a
right.
17-second knockout, but on the wrong end. But hey, I got what I wanted, right? It's kind of
It's
fucked up,
funny,
but
man,
in my
how
opinion.
how
Yeah,
sometimes what we want definitely shows up, but it shows up in a completely different color than what we expected.
yeah, you say
What
that.
I mean, but what did you learn though? I mean, because you've obviously you haven't just like walked away from the. That's what's most interesting to me is how you've just, at least from what I've seen on social media, and I know you're not a bullshitter, but from what I've seen, it's just you've really embraced this coaching role, and
Yeah.
so like that for a lot of people that's hard because they're too selfish, and so what are your thoughts on that?
Uh, so like at first, man, once I decided to stop competing, like I tried to do other jobs. Like I was a roofing consultant for a little bit. I quit doing that. Then I was just kind of working at a local gym. Then COVID hit, and like once COVID hit, I was like, I don't know if you've seen the South Park COVID special. Have you seen that,
No, not coming to
dude?
mind.
So at the beginning of the episode, Cartman was like, "Oh my god, I love social distancing." Like he wasn't leaving the house, and then like when they announced they're gonna send the kids back to school, he was throwing a fit. He's like, "I can't go back to society. I can't do this. There's a deadly disease outside." I was kind of Cartman there for a while, like at least like 2 years. I was content never leaving the house ever again. And then I ended up moving back to St. Louis. I started plumbing with my dad, and that was a mess. Literally, I did not like it. And I started getting back into it at the gym. Started doing privates at the gym. Things fell apart with me and the plumbing company. So then, my girlfriend was just like, "Dude, just do what you have to do. Just like if you want to do this, just go ahead and do this, and I will hold it down until uh, you can establish yourself." And I just took that and just kept going and going and going. Luckily, I was blessed to just have what I needed to make a way for myself.
Dude, that's cool. Yeah, well, it's key to have the support at
Yeah,
if you don't have the significant relationships in your life, if they're not with what you're trying to do, it's possible. And
yeah,
that's the biggest thing that I've kind of taken away uh in the last handful of years myself is that there's something about giving back, and it sounds all cheesy and stuff at first, but there's a every time I volunteer or every time that I give myself, it doesn't have to action. If I present myself honestly to somebody and do the work that I said I would do it with integrity, feel good,
yeah,
and it really
yeah. Your audio's cutting. Randy, your audio cut. Oh no. Yeah, there it is. There it
yeah,
is.
I
You
get
what?
caught up on money, and I think a lot of people do that. Um, especially with what we just started our nation, and the administration change, and everybody talks about the wealth that's going to be exploding, and there's this whole push for wealth, and I think people don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just a personal belief, but like, I think that jobs are being like so simplified. Like your everyday 9 to 5. If you're not a tradesman, you're basically just pressing a button. You know what I mean? And like, if you look at it every year, more jobs getting taken away, and like like AI is pretty scary, man. I don't know how people think that AI isn't going to come in and take every office job away. Because like my buddy works at Spectrum, and like his whole apartment got shrunken down to the point where he's just kind of just running a program now. And sooner or later, there's going to be a program to do his job, and then that department's going to get even smaller. It's just going to be the whole oversight is just going to be smaller and smaller to one guy just watching a computer to make sure nothing goes crazy. And there's a lot of people who also support that idea. You know what I mean? Like I feel like our biggest hope is just like utopia, where we just kind of like have artistic jobs and basically just get like a basic income, which sounds kind of
Well,
crazy, but
it
there's a
just
lot of
it
evidence.
begs the question: fulfill us? I get biblical, and you start talking about manly. I truly believe that because there's something else other than just having our bills paid, though. Because all of a sudden you get your bills paid, and you lose all sense of purpose of
Right.
meaning. And so yeah, that with AI, what it is, you were exactly right. It's just simplifying everything, and eventually it's sort of devouring all the jobs. But I don't see it stopping. And so my question is kind of like the internet. I just hope we're not being like old fogies before the internet time, and starting to think
Right.
like, oh, the internet's gonna, all hell's gonna break loose, Y2K type of
Yeah.
thinking. But I think it's just a call to, you said it, like, you got to really figure out what you're doing, and what sets you apart from AI,
Right.
and that's like for you. I'm thinking that's like the relationship building that you're doing with these athletes as on their punches, and their develop them into the next version of themselves to be that sort of thing. That's what I mean. That fulfillment, you can't match that anywhere, and you can't just use AI for it. It can't
No.
be replicated. With 9 professional fights and however many amateurs before that, and however many hours in the wrestling room before that, that sort of thing, and that's just your particular niche. There's people who, again, you're going to need somebody who can cut a tree down and know how to cut a
Exactly.
tree down. So it's interesting how trades and skilled trades have become on the radar. I think it's pretty clear that, like, you're not going to find a robot that's going to do underwater welding to a degree that takes the skill sets of the top level guys. But the question is what does that mean for everybody who's not the top 2% in their skill set?
Who
You
knows what
know,
that means,
that's where
man?
I think it's exploration. People have to. We're all gifted with different abilities, and people have to start understanding that. To then That'll really help people find their 2%. I think.
Right.
Like nobody's built like me, or nobody can, because I've done this. So I'm gonna take this path and run with it. It's no different than what you've done.
Right.
Because again, you're AI protected.
Yeah, I mean, at least I hope so. Once I started coming out with rap songs, I was like, maybe I'm not. I didn't expect it ever to be like that creative. You know what I mean? That was kind of scary. And they started coming
For
out with
sure.
music and started making like movie scripts. But I feel like a lot of movie scripts are AI now because it seems like they're not even really that creative anymore. It seems like
See,
they're just telling the
there's something
same.
about the human that can detect that, though. There's something
Yeah,
about us that you can detect that, and I think that's what's actually going to save us. Is
I
if you
hope so.
detect, like, hey, this is not what I want. It's a compelling movie and everything, but it was predictable, and it was and it was one of those things you can just tell this is AI. That's the other thing. You see these AI photos on social media all the time, and it's like you
My,
can see that from a mile away.
right. My girlfriend kind of like watches like all the little like dramatic little rom com things, and I was watching them with her, and like there's three separate shows that all mention like Y2K around like the same kind of concept. I'm like, that's kind of weird. Like, who wrote this? And it's like, oh, there's three separate writers, but they all wrote about Y2K, and I thought that was like a really random thing to like collaborate around. You know what I mean? I feel like these
No,
guys are using the
I
same
hear you loud and
program.
clear.
I feel like they're using the same program to write the scripts.
Right. No, it wouldn't surprise me. There's but the majority of the people, they don't give a shit.
No.
They just want something to entertain 98 minutes, and then after that, then they can go on Rotten Tomatoes and how the movie sucked, and then they get trapped into this perpetual
Loop.
making sure that nobody's paying attention to what they're doing. But those types of people, there's so many of them. That's the thing, and that's what gives that's what gives the machine its power, is these drones.
But yeah, I feel like mental health is really diluted nowadays. 'Cause I feel like a lot of us are told what to think instead of learning how to think.
Dude, it's so hard. If you step out of line just one little bit, you're gonna hear from it, or hear from somebody about it. You sort of view that happens to be, you know well, it is interesting because I was actually just gonna break down that argument. There's a weird sort of like extreme. Like, you're allowed to do super super crazy shit and say crazy things. Like, you're allowed to say that you have a penis, but you're a female, and it's like nobody can call you out on that. But
Yeah,
if you kind of object to paying federal taxes, and if you maybe object to some sort of other thing, that's all of a sudden will let you know. So
right.
it seems really bizarre to me that people are blind to the major. I'm going to step out of bounds on this, and people are like, yeah, yeah, you can do that. You go ahead and step right out of bounds. But if you just barely feather your foot out of bounds, sometimes I feel like wham, then you're just knocked off your feet. Everybody says, how you can't think that way. You got to get back. You either got to go super super off field, or you got to march down the line.
Yeah, with the taxes and stuff too, it had to be collective. You know what I mean? But like even when you talk about how I got an argument with the family member the other night when you talk about how billionaires find ways to avoid paying taxes. So it's just like, well, they still pay a majority of the taxes. It's just like, yeah, well, yeah, dude, I don't have $1 billion. Okay, I definitely don't have 20 billion. If they pay 1 billion of 20 billion, they're paying a whole lot more than I'm ever going to pay in taxes. So of course they have a larger share of the taxes. That's common sense.
Right.
But when they're making 20 billion and they're supposed to pay like 5 billion and they're paying 500 million, like now, like how's that not kind of rub you the wrong way? It's just like you wouldn't do it if you could. It's not really the point. It's not the point. All right.
Somebody who's uber wealthy has gone down the wayside, because back, I guess you could make the argument that guys like Rockefeller, and they were nasty wealthy as well. But I don't know, there was foundations, and not to say that there wasn't corruption involved with those guys, but I think the point is that if you're it shouldn't just be, again, your aim shouldn't be to go out and make a bunch of money, because
Right.
then what happens when you do that? Well, then that ends. You just went out and you made a bunch of money, but did you make the community any better? Did you help anybody else along the way? Were you thinking about the kids who can't read? And so, like Zoolander, you need to make a foundation for the kids who can't read well, type of a thing, because that's I want to persecute somebody who's made a ton of money,
Right.
because it just is a representation of how hard they worked. The problem is our whole system can be gamed.
Right.
And that's what you were talking about with the reluctance to pay taxes, and so on and so forth. It just comes down to what is the responsibility of somebody who makes $1 billion.
Well, I still feel like they're
And
paying like taxes, but they're kind of paying the bank more of a tax than they're paying the government a tax. You know what I mean? Like the bank kind of lets them weasel their
Oh,
way
for
through
sure.
paying all those taxes, but they're paying a smaller interest than what we're actually paying in taxes. So they'll give themselves a salary enough to pay for the loans they take out against their assets to keep taking loans out against their assets to avoid paying taxes. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It's a perpetual game, and they just kind of
Yeah.
keep kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer, but at the same time, like I had a buddy who ended up becoming pretty wealthy, and when you start seeing how his family kind of like at first they weren't never around, and then when he started driving a Ferrari, like hey, 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 what's up, hey, and they start leeching on. So I imagine when you do get that kind of wealth, and then you see the people that will kind of you know, and try to freeload onto you. I imagine
All
it would kind of dehumanize you towards like I don't want to say regular people, but like people that aren't in your tax bracket. Does that make sense? Like, why would I want to help these people when they don't really want to help me, and they weren't really around until they felt like I was necessary to have around?
for sure.
Like,
That's why I think the again, it's the odds of a rich man getting into heaven are just slim because it can sort of um, present all of those pitfalls you just said. That's like, man, you start looking down on humanity. You start
yeah,
looking down on people that don't have what you have because they must not have worked as hard as you've worked. And that's even somebody who's honest. That's
yeah,
somebody who worked hard to get what they got. How difficult is it then to look at everybody else and be like, why can't you do the same thing?
right,
And and so it's really easy, especially the slugs that come crawling out of the woodwork, which there's
dude.
going to be,
I saw some of
and
his
how
family
you're
members.
supposed to.
I saw some of the family members that like he hasn't talked to in years, and it's like, oh, me and so fell off. We haven't really talked. And like once it was obvious that he had a decent amount of money, they were just coming out of the woodwork. So it was kind of gross, man. I kind of felt bad for him to an extent. Like it's hard to feel bad for a guy riding around in a couple Ferraris, but at the same time, it's like I kind of get it. Kind of get it.
Right, right. Yeah, it's one of those things that I've kind of. It's weird because if somebody offered me a Ferrari or $1 million today, it'd be hard pressed not to take it. Like that's how big of a pull like temptation and wealth is. But I think we both understand that. I mean, pretty much anything given to you without effort,
Yeah.
it's really tough. And I think that's why spoiled kids are the way they are. They just get so much that their whole perspective just is warped. And so you got to ask yourself how much is the appropriate amount, because it's one of those things that you can't go through this life alone. So you have to negotiate with yourself. What am I willing to take from people in a sense of not taking shit from them, but like what gifts am I willing to accept from people, and what else, what is not. Where's that line
Right.
that becomes where's the line, which Nintendo game does the kid become spoiled at? When I grew up,
Right.
it was whoever actually had. And so
Yeah.
nowadays nowadays there's a whole different level of spoiled, but it is interesting, what level to. I mean, not bad enough to have nice things. Not everybody who drives a Porsche is an asshole.
Yeah. Right.
At least I'd like to think,
Yeah.
I'd like to think that.
Yeah. Maybe. No, my
But think about how that works. Because if everybody who drives a Porsche is an asshole, I don't want to become an asshole.
right.
And so then all of a sudden it kind of prevents me from ever, having sort of any abundance, and they talk about that with the abundance mindset that, we might not be realizing the sort of limitations we're putting on ourselves just because of, technically what would be considered a character flaw on my end, envy and greed, and just the idea that anybody driving a nicer car than me must have done something, crooked to get it.
Yeah.
And And it's like, well, that type of mindset, that's just going to leave you, stomped over and feeling like a victim your whole life.
I'm not gonna lie.
So
Every time I see someone like doing well with like a minimal amount of skill, not a minimal amount of skill, just not as much as like others. I always kind of wonder, like, where's that financial backing coming from? Because you'll see a lot of people nowadays that are doing fairly well, like, especially on Facebook and stuff. Like when you know that they're not, you know, they're not really, they don't present a giant skill set, or just what they do isn't making the amount of money that they're showing they're making. Does that make sense?
actually skillless.
Yeah,
Bringing in on paper, and into their bank accounts, they're bringing in money, right?
right. Yeah,
You got to have a skill set that you've got to have something to put some skin in the game, and you got to have something of worth.
right.
All these materials and all of it, if you notice, like materials are becoming more and more worthless every year. You can just order shit on Timu, and you
Yeah,
can just get
right.
clothes that used to be, um, you can get clothes that used to just cost a fortune, and you can just get them instantly, and everything's just showing up at your doorstep. And so that trend, if sooner or later, if the small materials are starting to become less valuable and pretty much value less, worthless.
Yeah.
If all the small shit is, when does that creep up next bigger level of stuff?
Well, it has before. Remember the housing crisis? Remember, dude, everyone, millions of people lost their houses, millions, and then they got thrown out on the streets. A bunch of public banks got bought up. The private banks bought all the small banks, and the big banks got bailed out by the government. So, like, that, what you're saying has
It's
happened.
worse though. I think this differently though. It's not going to pull people out of their houses. I don't see the housing market crash. I see the labor market
Yeah,
inverted and whipped around, and that's what's going to be so messed up, is because these careers that people are pumping a ton of resources in life, their hours each week, they're not or pursue the skills that they have, or pursue anything of value. These sort of jobs are going to essentially own people,
yeah,
and that's what's going to happen. There's going to be no pulling out of that. And that thing for me, that yeah, it's bizarre to think about. But as fast as fast as the internet took all of the jobs from us, that it has, the AI is just going to do it 10 times, 100 times faster. And we're perpetuating it, essentially by even us getting involved with this conversation on YouTube. It contributes to it.
right. Like,
I don't know how to.
someone's got to revolt though. Like, I can't imagine, because like you see they're starting to make like the self driving cargo trucks, right? But you saw what the
Hmm.
truckers did in like Canada, and you saw what the truckers did in the U.S. But like, some of those truckers actually got debanked. So like, even some of them are like getting their kids taken away. They're talking about on the Rogan show that if they're protesting, they're doing these long protests and that long away from their kids, they're obviously bad parents. So we're gonna go take their kids because they're obviously not tending to their children. And then some of them got debanked by private governmental institutions. And it's just like so. This circles back around to Bitcoin. Like once we start to fall too much in love with this digital currency, and they decide, oh hey, all right, well we're gonna make our own digital currency since you guys like this so much. Now the dollar that you had, the piece of paper that you had that says it's worth money, it's not worth money anymore. So now everything you own is going to be on a hard drive. And if we don't agree with what you say, we're just going to delete your hard drive. We're going to debank your whole credit system. And then, like, personally to me, that terrifies me. Like, if you look at gold,
No, oh, for sure.
gold is always going to be always going to be valuable. Like, paper's not going to be valuable. Gold will always be valuable, and the price of gold is just
Gold and bullets.
bam, 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 bam. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's. I said gold and bullets. Will
Yeah.
always be valuable.
Well, even
Yeah, it's. I.
even Pam Bondi, like the AG that Trump got, she supports a lot of stuff that conservatives didn't want. Like she supports red flag laws, like a lot of the laws that she put in Florida with like open carry and everything. It has a lot of like diehard gun right guys really scared.
Yeah, I don't really know how I feel about the entire uh, Trump administration, Trump election. I definitely. It's hard to give an opinion of, and that's my opinion. Is that it's such a disruptor.
Yeah,
Um, this time coming in, knows what he's up against. I think there was a bit, even saying Trump is very smart and very savvy, but he, when he got elected by experience, what Washington, D.C. was all about, he got chewed up and spit out.
yeah,
And so now the, he's back and he's back with a vengeance. And I don't necessarily know what that means because I don't know, with the amount of people that he's got on his squad, that's just sort of like celebrity superstar status. I don't know if that's a time of our age, but with Elon being, essentially he looks like he's a vice president
yeah, right.
of the administration. You see more about Elon and what he's going to be doing with the the doggy department, and it's like, yeah, it's going to be a massive disruption, and I don't know if that's good or bad.
I don't know either. And like I don't know if Elon could be vice president or could run. He can't run president. I always liked Elon, but like the more like he's kind of like thrown into this political spotlight, he's kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But I try to find the negative and everything. I'm kind of like a pessimist my whole life. My girlfriend hates it, but but yeah, he's from South Africa. Yeah, right. Like he's from South Africa, so he couldn't really actually run for president, or like I said, I don't think he can be vice president either. So like if he can find a way to buy into some power, he could actually, this is the way to go about it. Yeah. Yeah.
Us and veterans. Well, then what the heck are we donating resources to an entirely different planet for?
Yeah, I agree. I think, but there's so much stuff going on here that I feel like we should just completely shut down sending money anywhere else. I think we should shut down the border. I don't think there should be free trade among us and Mexico because that just allows these corporations to basically just get sweatshops. You get enough money, you just open a factory in Mexico, and you know you don't have. There's no tariffs. There's no taxes. You trade freely. It's not a long commute. You know what I mean?
Well, that supposedly is what Trump is doing. That was the whole hype, was that he's going to introduce tariffs again to the deal, and we're going to all learn what tariff means, and we're going to have the most tariffs, and we're going to have the best tariffs, and I'm all for that because again, I'm an American and I live in
Yeah,
America, and I want, I'd rather have, instead of increasing taxes on the working class, just build the stuff here in the states,
yeah.
and
I,
and
I
make it
agree.
all.
I agree with that. But the way the tariffs were explained to me was that so any American business that did dealings with overseas countries, they would be the ones that are charged with the tariffs. So if that's how that works, then I think that would hurt our American businesses much more than it would hurt the other countries. Because I feel like America doesn't offer too much to the world. Our global trade isn't necessarily all that high. Besides,
No, no.
like
Well, that's because at the moment, the argument could be made is that's because everything that would be getting produced here is already getting produced in China, or like there's there's Toyota, and there's Ford Motor Company plants, just over the border in Mexico.
yeah,
And so the idea is to like hyper incentivize them to get their plants back into the states, the labor force that's going to then generate, the economy. Because again, people can, but that's assuming that there's going to be millions of jobs at these companies still. Like
yeah.
there's so many job manufacturing jobs that are just sort of gone by the wayside.
Well,
And so
go ahead.
I was going to say that Americans sort of have an ego complex when it comes to wanting to take a job on an assembly line, or something like that, and
Yeah,
so it's like we've almost, yeah, for sure, and that I feel it, but I'm also not living hand to mouth at the moment, so maybe if I was living hand to mouth and I was at a different position in my life, because I have worked some menial jobs before, to make things work, and
yeah.
I'm also, I mean, heck, even this past summer I was mowing lawns on the side, and it wasn't necessarily any family. I don't necessarily working outside a day or two.
The
I do think at the end of the day, change starts with the individual, and not with a system,
right. I
adjustment.
agree with that. I think we could pump as much money into our own economy as we can, but until we change like the way people think, it's gonna be hard to really come out of whatever hole we're in. Like, because I feel like we're such a it, like the U.S. is almost like the Las Vegas of the whole world. Like, we live in this like utopia of like comfort and excitement and entertainment that we kind of just, it doesn't seem like we live in the real world. If that makes sense. Like, we couldn't understand how some people struggle, and we couldn't even imagine. And then we like want to sit inside and criticize how people treat others, when in reality we're all kind of treating people like shit. Does that make sense?
In that billions of
Right.
know and have experienced in the world that we don't have a clue about. You
Right. Like
know,
all
I
everyone.
remember
Go ahead. Sorry.
I used to pretend when I was cutting weight, and I would be like such a baby, and I would be crying to myself, and I'd have my life so bad, and nothing was worth anything, and it was like, man, you're still gonna get in a car and drive up to the wrestling room to go weigh in, and you're gonna, have a Gatorade in your bag to chug after the weigh in, and it's like there's people who live in the world like they won't, they won't get to just our food, and have, there's a level of privation that's sustained consistently by people that's unbelievable. And I mean, the modern the modern world, the first world countries are just we're so naive to that completely. You said it best. I mean, we're the Las
Yes,
Vegas of the world. Just smothered with uh, hedonistic pleasures and instant gratification that we can just grab and stimulate ourselves for the instant. It leaves you feeling like shit, though.
I mean, in the short term gratification, like feels good for a minute, but like once you get addicted to that little short term gratification, and you don't have any long term goals to really work towards. Like you really start craving that short term, and once you can't get that short term gratification, then it really hits in, dude. Like start getting withdrawals.
Pleasure, yeah, that instant. It can, that's the thing. We're as humans, you can really find it attached to almost anything, but obviously, sex and food are just biological components that uh, I've watched people just get enslaved by,
Well, video games, too,
and
video games too. Look at like cell phone games, like like oh, you're
God,
playing this mind numbing cell phone game that you want
right.
to level, and you're like, oh, cool, I want a level, I want
Yeah,
another.
it's the illusion of progress. It's the illusion of
Yes,
making real progress.
I agree with that
Hey,
completely.
dude, I gotta cut us off here. I'm actually gonna run out of phone battery here in probably a couple minutes, but
Right on.
I would I actually want to do this again. I just kind of enjoy this discussion, and there's an accountability factor with knowing that it's on live YouTube. Anybody could just happen to pop in and see it, but I just feel starved for honest discussion. And you've always been somebody who has stood out to me, who's willing to at least try to engage and wrestle with what we think is true, because it's not always easy to figure it out. But
For sure, man.
I
Yeah,
appreciate
anytime
I
you want to
appreciate
do this, anytime you want to do this, let me know. I just, I suck at scheduling stuff.
all good. I'm glad we could actually make it work beyond the technical difficulties. But
Yes,
no,
sir.
that's it's much appreciated. So cool, brother. Well, until next time, then
Yes, sir.
be well.
Yes, sir. You too, buddy.